Welcome back to the Dopesick Show you won't get sick of. I'm Spencer, and this is Sasha. I spent most of my 20s in federal prison, but I've been off heroin since April 9, 2010. Got a lot of stories about that dumb stuff I did to get put in prison. I've also got quite a few stories about the wild stuff that actually happened when I was in prison. And God forbid you end up in prison, you won't make some of the same mistakes I made. This is a story about incompetence among the staff as it is anything else. This is the wildest fight that people will probably talk about for a decade at Petersburg Low, and it could have been prevented so easily. Now, first off, one of the two people in this I have told a story about before. I have a story rather called Prison Fights I Fought a Prison Monster. This guy was 240 pounds, 5'10", fought Butterbean. He did not win. He did not get knocked out against Butterbean. If you know who Butterbean is, if you last 4 rounds against Butterbean was morbidly obese, but this guy he was the 4-round king, you know, those tough man boxing matches. This guy brawled with Butterbean and lost by decision. If Butterbean can't knock him out, what are you going to do against him? Now, he'd been in a motorcycle accident, so he had a messed up ankle. That messed his mobility up a little bit, but he still had the hands. He would do certain things just to antagonize people. For instance, this is a white country guy from Tennessee, and some people call him Sling Blade, some people call him Robot, dog like this. And I remember one time he walked right in the black TV room, turned the TV on him, said, what y'all think about that? And they're just sitting there looking at each other like, do we do something? He's like, it's okay, I'll turn it back. And he walked out just to antagonize people. He would do stuff like this. He'd act like he could rap. What he did was he had a bunch of Beastie Boys songs memorized. He didn't know how to rap, but he'd go out there and a couple times he got himself in some stuff. But anyhow, the second guy, Crazy Joe. Crazy Joe was a body weight workout phenom. He didn't do weights in a prison with weights, which I don't understand that. He was about 170 to 175 pounds, ripped to the bone. And he could do that thing where you hang off of like a flagpole with your body straight out. He'd just do handstand push-ups in the middle of the floor with his feet, not even up against the wall. He was the body weight workout king of that prison. Some people went to him for diet and nutrition. I went to a guy named Steve, who was in there for robbing pharmacies with a pharmacist, a lawyer, and him, who he had 3 degrees in fitness, decided they're going to rob pharmacies one day, but that's a separate story. So Crazy Joe and Sling Blade end up in the same cell. Okay, got to press this. We're all good, though. Ended up in the same cell together. Our counselor at Petersburg Low, who is now retired, was the most egotistical, narcissistic idiot ever. But he was a union rep, so he did have power. See, the guards are a union. He was a rep, and he drove a used Maserati, which, if you look up Maserati, see, I was thinking about getting one, because you can get one for $30,000. A used one. But there's a thing about that. And Caribbean drug lord Sean Pintar told me a little bit about that. He told me, Caribbean drug lord Sean Pintar told me, you do not want to get a Maserati. He said at 30,000 miles, the transmission goes out. That's why they sell them. That's why it goes from 100 down to 30,000. Oh, sorry. Got texts in there. Had to make sure nothing's wrong with the family. Sorry, I'm a nervous person. But anyway, yeah, he drove this used Maserati, and when he'd drive the perimeter around the fence, he'd make sure to burn out, to try to look cool and stuff. He could lift a little bit of weight. He was overweight, though, the counselor. He'd go out in the weight pile sometimes and try to act like he was tough and flex. He'd bench press a little bit. That was it, though. This counselor was an idiot. He would cuss you, say, F you. I run this prison. Or you tell him, I'm going to go to Miss So-and-so. F her. I run this prison. And he threatened to send you to Lee Hall, where there was a bunch of deviant activity. He threatened to put me in the bed that was next to the shower, where stuff went on at night, and swore that the noises that I'd hear, I wouldn't get any sleep. That was because I went over his head to a unit manager, and I told him I was going to go over his head. Typically, you get to see your family within 1 week. It had been 3 months. My own family was not on my visiting list. I told him, well, he was pissed off. He said, F Miss So-and-so, I run this prison. Well, I went Miss So-and-so, and he came up, told me, think about it. You, Lee Hall, all you gonna hear? And yeah, he said some off stuff. You know what I'm saying? He got a little bit vulgar with it. But anyhow, so these two guys were not getting along. Robot, like I said, he was 5'10", 240, not fat, just a big bone countryman. He hadn't lifted a weight, he said, in 10 years. His first day out there, he did 4 sets of 275 on bench press, chest to lockout, butt flat for 10. If you can do 4 sets of 275 pounds for 10 reps on bench press after not lifting for 10 years, you are a tank. Now, Crazy Joe was the body weight guy. Now, you got to think, between the two of them, Sling Blade, he had about 70 pounds on Crazy Joe. They kept telling the counselor, you need to move us. Something bad is going to happen. We're going to fight. Please, move us. The counselor just ignored them completely. And it all came to a head one day. Now, and I'm going to tell you the second thing, because I was not there for this, but I heard every bit of it. Pinto told me in depth, and he could tell you in depth all over again, but I've got a very good memory, so I can tell you pretty much as well as it was told to me. And I can also tell you the incompetence that was done afterwards. I probably split this up into 2 stories because of that. They ended up putting them in the same building after they got out of the hole, after this was done. But anyway, they were in the room, and Sling Blade would just say this stuff. He'd just say stuff to irk you, to mess with you, to get on your nerves. Stuff that would hit deep. He would annoy you. There were a couple times I cussed him out. He'd get on my nerves. People get on my nerves like that. I don't play like that with people because I can't be played like that. It bothers me that bad. I can't. I treat people how I want to be treated in terms of playing. There's certain lines you cross, so I don't cross those lines because I can't deal with that. Now, Crazy Joe was not one to be played with like that. He was the nicest guy. He was a good person. Now, Crazy Joe was in there. He had a crazy story. A girl who I'm not sure if it was his girlfriend or just a girl who was close to him was assaulted. Him and his boys got in the car, drove by the house of the guy who did it, lit the house up figuratively, and then they literally lit the house on fire. Turns out the guy was having a family reunion of sorts, and that the house that they just basically did a drive-by on was occupied with his whole family, and then they set it on fire. His first charge ever, he got like 20, 25 years. He was only about 30 years old when I met him, but he'd been in prison for over a decade. The way he carried himself, certain things made sense when you found out he'd been in prison that long, and he was started at a serious medium, had serious stuff. Italian dude had talked a little bit funny. I thought it was like a New York accent or something. I think it was just how he spoke. But anyway, Sling Blade said something to irk him, whatever it was, and Crazy Joe and headbutted him hard, and then got him in what's called a guillotine choke, which basically, if we're facing each other, pull your head down, get you in a choke, and he was choking him. He dabbled in grappling. There was a judo brown belt, Barber Mike, and he had trained with Barber Mike. He wanted to learn grappling so much, and we trained a good bit together too. And I'll talk about that in the next one, but there was a mistake he made in this fight, and he wanted to know how to correct it. But anyway, he was choking him with that guillotine, just cranking it, trying to get it, and he was getting him. Well, Sling Blade grabbed the old sisters. He grabbed his old twigs and berries and squeezed. Well, he let go of that choke pretty quick then. The fight started in the room, and this cubicle with 7-foot high dividers spilled out into the hallway. It continued. The door was open. Then there was an open area at the top of the stairs. It's an open TV room with 2 TVs on the wall. There's an ice machine over by the sides, chairs where people are watching TV, and they brawl there for 10 plus minutes. Okay. Crazy Joe, for whatever reason. Now keep in mind, Sling Blade fought Butterbean. Butterbean couldn't knock him out. But he had a motorcycle accident. His ankle had like a visible deformity where it was broken and it was really messed up. He ran from the cops on a motorcycle, wrecked the motorcycle, and broke his ankle. So he had basically government-sponsored treatment for the ankle. So of course it didn't get fixed well. So he couldn't move around and skip around. He basically was planning still. Now, he must have been in a good many street fights, because in the fight, the whole deal with me and him, I shot him for his legs, and he sprawled good on me, and it was basically through a roll through that I ended up, kind of like a sit out type deal, that I ended up reversing the position and getting him in what's called side mount. But he sprawled good, he sprawled quick, and before that he popped me the hardest I've ever been hit in my life. It took my lip for like 2 months to heal. But he didn't know much grab. When you get him on his back, it's a different story. Maybe because of my previous incident with him, maybe that's what Crazy Joe thought. And maybe that's what Crazy Joe was trying to do. He remembered what I did, and he knew just enough from training with Barber Mike that if he'd gotten him in one of those positions, he probably could have held him there effectively and finished it. But he shot in, Sling Blade sprawled. Well, he has to get back up. He has to get back up from this position of going for a double leg and failing because it's been sprawled on. So what he does is he just aborts, pops back up, and when he pops back up, Sling Blade, boom, boom, through two, popped him hard. They fought left and right, up and down, just destroying each other, completely just ripping each other to shreds. And they said it was the bloodiest fight. They said there was blood everywhere, both of their blood. They said it was an even fight. It was a good fight. It was one of the best fights you would have ever seen in prison, according to everybody in there. It's not often a fight goes for 15 minutes. It's not often that anybody has the cardio to keep going that long, or the will, the gut, the endurance, the grit to go for that long. That's an extremely long time to fight. The average fight, and I've been in a handful, but I witnessed hundreds of them. I saw other people getting fights. I actually had a notebook. I didn't write down people's names. You always hear me talking about height and weight, size people up. I would write down the height and weights of the people and basically what happened. I have a notebook full of prison fights and the outcomes. Most prison fights, 5 to 10 punches are exchanged. The first person to usually take a clean hit grabs, and they both just kind of waltz around in an aimless standing grappling. That's why I started training judo, was because of that. Usually 30 seconds later, both guys are gassed out. The fight is over. The end. Finito. But these guys weren't grabbing. These guys were boxing until Crazy Joe shot in for that double leg, of course. I think he might have, they're getting a little bit tired. Now, see, Crazy Joe, without question, had the better cardio, had the better endurance, without question. But what he lacked was the experience. Sling Blade Robot's the same one. I alternate names. Sorry about that if that's confusing to anybody. But he had the experience. He had been in tons, I'm talking probably 100 plus tough man competitions. Okay, he trained a little boxing, but tough man competitions are basically rock'em sock'em robots. You put two people in a ring, they swing themselves out. They usually have 1 minute rounds. It sounded like the Butterbean those were 3 minute rounds with 1 minute rest, but it's usually just, he had the experience. When you get in a fight, your adrenaline goes up. A lot of people end up breathing hard before the first punch is ever thrown in the anticipation for it. What Sling Blade had, Crazy Joe didn't, was the experience to stay calm. He's in a fight. This is a familiar place for him. Crazy Joe had been in a good number of fights. This guy had been in probably quadruple the number of fights he'd been in. So that experience comes into play. So even though Crazy Joe had the better cardio, the better endurance, Sling Blade having that, calmness about it, and he can't move around on his feet a whole lot, so he's just standing still. He's waiting for him to come in, counter him, everything else. So that was a key factor in this. And ultimately, the guards rushed in. They took them both to solitary confinement, which is the shoe, and the last part, of that I will bring up was you're not supposed to go to outdoor rec, at the same time as the person who you got in a fight with in the shoe. The incompetence of this staff, there are 3 different cages. They call it outdoor rec. It's like a 20 by 20 foot cage. When I was in the hole, I just didn't go to it because anytime you went to the hole, they tore your room apart. You're not supposed to have a radio once you go to punishment block. I snuck one back. Pretty creative way how I did it too. I'm good at smuggling stuff and sneaking stuff. But anyway, so I didn't go to rec because I knew they'd find that radio, I'd lose it, and that was the one thing that kept me sane. So Sling Blade's in one cage. There's a cage in between them. Crazy Joe's over here. So they make eye contact across the way, and Sling Blade says, "Joe, sorry for grabbing your nuts, but I had to, man. You were choking me. So, what was I going to do?" the guys in between have no context as to what he's talking about. Think about what I just said. Sorry that you were choking me, and yeah, it sounded like it wasn't a fight. It sounded like something else, something pretty comical. And Crazy Joe is big about his reputation inside of prisons. He's like, whoa, no, you guys don't get, no, it was a fight. Everybody started laughing because everybody thought something else was going on. So that was a funny thing to be put into context with this. And I will tell, more about what happened after this. I'll probably do it in the next day if, this gets enough attention. This was a fun one. I need to get Pinto on here. I need to learn that whole StreamYard thing and everything else. If I could do that, it would be really cool to get him on here and talk to him. I'm going to get him to start a channel. I'm telling you, he can pass everybody up. He's got more stories, more life experience than, 23 years old. Got caught with $1.2 million and $700,000 in the bank. DEA did an undercover 1-year operation on him. He's paying off judges, politicians, and 4 police officers to rob his competition. I will get him on here. So anyway, if you liked the video, press the like button. If not, that is 16 minutes on the dot of your life, which you'll never get back. But I hope you did, though.